Right, okay. Good morning. So if you had some time to go back and look at the code, try to run it and then try to figure it out if everything is working fine. Okay, so there was a bit of echo from two different streams. All right, so today what we will do is that we will try to look at a different side of the attacks. We'll try to understand all kind of attacks that are available, not just from generative AI, but also from a classical sense. And then from there on, we will look at, go back to the deepfake attacks and then try to at least train one model and then try to understand how the models work and what happens with the generic conditions and then what happens with generalization. Sounds good? Okay, so far any questions that you have had from before? No questions? Okay, good. So then let's start thinking about this one of these attacks in the face recognition. Just to recap, let's go back and then try to understand how face recognition systems work. Good. So this is something that we started with, right? We said, okay, it could be any black box network, it could be feature engineered, whatever that is. So it extracts a set of features and then it detects a person as A or person. Right? This is like typical cycle. And now if we generalize it a bit back, from day one, we also saw that it's very similar to what we do in fingerprint recognition or voice recognition or any other way, right? So these are generic way of trying to understand the face recognition. But then whenever we talk about the biometric systems, so whenever we talk about the biometric systems, if we kind of understand it from a signal processing view, what does it do? It basically does a data capture, right? And then the data capture is coming from your cameras, in the case of face. It's coming from the fingerprint sensors, if it's case of fingerprints, audio recorder in the case of voice, and so on. So anything that we are dealing with is a data capture. And then if we just ignore or if we generalize telling that whatever is happening inside the box is a signal processing box, it's nothing but it extracts the features, whether it's deep learning, whether it's classical or any kind of filter based, it extracts some set of features. And then you do a comparison against a database that is stored somewhere, and then you make it, right? So this is the as simple approach of biometric systems in the sense of signal processing. Now, as soon as we talk about this one, so we can also start thinking about what kind of attacks are possible. So where are the attacks possible? So if I'm trying to send a signal inside here, and the signal can be processed, and the processing part can be attacked, right? So that forms the first part where we have the attack. And then we have the second one, where I can say that, okay, I do not have access to either this module or this module, but then only at the comparison point, I get a score of 0.5, 0.6, whatever that is. So 0.5 can be flipped to 0.6. Right? If I flip to 0.5 to 0.6, then the person becomes automatically identified. So then comes the second part where we have the comparison. And then we have the decision. Maybe the comparison says 0.5, and then before I send the decision back, I can say that the person is answered. So all these pipeline variable we have, it all forms the basis of attacks. And now if you go a bit more in depth, so you can start seeing that it's not only those modules I can attack, I can also attack the intermediate ones. So what happens in the intermediate one? So I come here and then let's assume that here the data is captured and the signal is processed, and then I'm trying to verify myself, and then suddenly I'm putting the picture of Manvi, right? So there is a change of the probe data itself. So I can flip the data. And then if you don't want to do this, what I can do is like, instead of attacking it here at the time I'm trying to verify myself, I could also go to the database storage, and then I can modify that. So what I'm going to do, instead of keeping my photo, my face image there, I can put somebody else's face. So every time I'm trying to get myself with some random effect, it will be identified as that. So this is what typically is called as modified reference. It's a bit more tricky in the sense that you need to have access to the database. So if I'm trying to attack the Aadhaar card database, I need to provide the database code and then I update. Now, instead of doing the override of the comparison, I could also do score changes to 0.5 to 0.6 instead of thinking of all those. And then comes the point where I can do also other kind of attacks, which are typically called as leakage. So what do I mean by leakage? So in the sense that I have the database, let's assume two banks, State Bank of India, and then let's assume one more private bank, let's say ICICI Bank. So you have both of them have the same users. So I'm registered in ICICI, also here. So by just looking at the data sets, the database is there, try to establish the same person is present without even knowing, right? Without even knowing who that person is, I can try to see they are the same person is existing. Now the implication is a bit larger, right? If I know that I bank with ICICI, I bank with SBI, then it's easy for somebody else to try to link the other project. So this is something that we will discuss tomorrow. We are talking about the features and the principles of but just have this idea of all this and that, right? And then comes the second part. If I do not really care about all these aspects, all I can do is I can attack the system at the cap. So what do I mean by attack at the cap? So 2 days ago we discussed about the images from the social media. So if I take a picture of yours from Facebook or Instagram, wherever that is, then I just simply make it, and then I could put it back to that, right? Now this is the most primitive attack. And we saw the same thing for the event, saw that create a thing, last sample, then I can. So I don't need to really look into the whole system. I don't care about it, but I can just attack initial one. Now, those of you who are bit more the movies, you might have also seen the attacks, which is based on the masks, silicon mask. Seen this Mission Impossible and movies like right. So there you have the mask, and this mask is again an attack mechanism at the captain. Right? Okay, and then now let's assume that I have a very secure system here. My camera is very well secured, and this system is also well secured. So what can I do? I can simply inject the data. Right? And I don't know how many of you have been following the media trends recently, but people have been having interviews online. Right? Then there's a person behind the camera, and then he's answering the question, but the stream is injected by someone. Right? So this is typically what is called as between the capture unit, between the processing unit, there is an injection. It's slightly complicated in real life to carry, but with modern technology, it's more easy. But this is something that's more relevant for the in the wild set, not not when a police officer is sitting in front of you. You cannot really conduct these attacks, except this one. Maybe this one you can do that. But all these things can happen in the behind the scene. So this one. So this standards here. So whenever you design a new system, so tomorrow you're going to the customer and then trying to sell the system, right? You tell that or you claim that your system is 100%, 100% accurate with respect to what, right? So that it needs to qualify certain criteria. For instance, is it able to distinguish all kind of so maybe your system is very good for only detecting paper, but it's not good for detecting mask. So in the standards, they define multiple species of attacks, such as paper attacks. They call it as level 1, level 2, level 3 attacks. And these are all different degree of, say, the strength of the attack, severity, right? And then you also, whenever you're reporting the performance, you don't report just that once. You have to report the performance in a standardized. So you as a vendor, whatever you are saying should be the same as me as a vendor. Okay. So the whole presentation at 30107 deals with this creation of standard. Um, that is one attack, and this is a bit of information. Right? The CN is like the working group. In the working group, they are trying to establish. You see the WG here, WGAD. WG is nothing but it's a working group. So working group that are trying to create the new metric and that's based on evaluating for signals. Now your deep fake falls typically in this because we are trying to inject some strings. Okay, so again, that's a very good point because there is a lot of work that needs to be done in standardization. So it might be very interesting. Okay, so now if I go here, then I told you also this other attack, right? I'll talk a bit about that. There is another standard which is called 20059, which deals with morphing attacks. Morphing attack in some ways is a subcategory of deepfakes. I'll show how it actually works and how it is set the secure access. But remember, that happens at the enrollment stage. So this happens when I'm going to get my password. So I go give my pictures. When I'm giving my pictures, I get some data. I'll show some samples about that. But just to recap again, how easy is it to conduct this kind of attacks, right? So if you look at the very first generation of iPhones back in 2014, please see that they lift the fingerprint. And once the fingerprint is lifted, they just simply create a new sample. And so this was the template application, right? Remember, I told you that they can capture multiple samples. Every single time they're capturing the image, they're updating until they're satisfied. But this is the same thing that the on. They ask you to pay for this. Certain standards are high and so. So now once this is done, what you can do is you can simply back in the now it's all fine. Right now, simple making it and they created it, and it has exactly the same patterns. And now, right? So this is the first demonstration that I actually made in by Computer Chaos Lab in Germany. It's a group of medical hackers who sat down and then, now, if you remember, there's a very simple countermeasure, right? So all the fingerprint detection we spoke about is subsurface fingerprint. That can be very easily used. At the same time, although I say that it can be very easy to use, remember the size of your spot. It's extremely thin, right? So with that thin sensors, you can't really integrate such a. So although some technologies are existing, can't really put that back. Okay, so then in the recent years, well, Apple actually also kind of changed their systems, and then they introduced this 3D face, right? So now most of you, when you're using your smartphones, you're kind of either capturing the 3D first time, and after it is captured 3D the first round, then you can use it. So you want it simple. Okay, in this one, there was another bunch of researchers in I think in Vietnam who actually showed how easy it was to also attack basically despite being free. So it is very innovative attack at that point. It was very innovative at that point, right? So you can look at that very closely. It's not even a very sophisticated mask, right? This is typically what you get in the stores, the mannequin. And on the mannequin, what they did is they attach some patches of face by simply pasting them onto that, then it was able to. The idea here is that the 3D information is available, and you can simulate the 3D, right? You can see the patches here, only the eye region, only the nose region, and so on. And that gives up the face because it gives you also the 3D. It's the depth, surfaces, and with that, it is there. So, just before I get further into this, remember anything that we are doing is typically in this field of research. It's typically now you can see that it's not even a full face. Just that here. This was the amount of partial information that we made to attack the system. Now we do not know internally what's happening, right? Internally, what technology they're using, they will never disclose it to us. But the idea here is that anything that you're trying to do, in the case of attack landscape or trying to mitigate the attack landscape, is typically a cat and mouse. So you come up with a countermeasure, and somebody comes up with an innovative way. So it's a field that continuously emerges. So just be prepared for the fact that if you come up with a very wonderful technique today, you need to also test it for previous attacks, and it's always okay. So now that we have established that the attacks can happen at a different levels, what can we do for that? So we can create some attack detection mechanism, and this is typically called as presentation attacks. The very first part where we're trying to understand. And what can I do here in this case? So whenever I have the samples, I have a bunch of samples which are all real samples, which are all fake samples or the unmatched samples, then I can trace. It's typically a two-class problem, right? So it's either apples or bananas. It's either real samples or it. So in this case, you can see that samples of one of our colleagues were collected using smartphones, all the images, very similar images. Now, these images can be presented in multiple forms. The simplest way is you print it out, and then you print it. If you are not so interested in printing it out, try to be a bit lazy, what you can do, just put it on a nice iPad, nice screen. Now, this very moment, you can tell me that, well, okay, I can come up with some techniques and technologies to address this problem. One of the techniques can be to look at if the person is blinking the eyes. Simple method, right? I can see if the person is blinking a certain period of time. Now, if you play the video, then there is a blink that is still. So it's like a constant issue there. So what can we do? If we do not want to care about the first part, I could still say that, okay, I do everything as normal, and then in the classifier space, I can learn a good classifier. So whatever the classifier is, whatever is your favorite classifier, SVN classifier, DGA classifier, learning-based classifier, whatever that is, you can still learn it. The whole idea is that you do not want to send it further down for the very. So if you already detect that this is a fake attack, this is a fake sample, why do you want to extract the face features and then try to do the verification? There's no use, right? I can already back. Now the other thing is that you could you could create your own method here for extracting features which are very specific to that. But if you don't want to, you could also extract one of the face recognition features and then try it. Like in the sense, if it is face recognition, you could use a face recognition extractor, face recognition feature extractor. If it is fingerprint, you could use a fingerprint feature extractor. Right? So, so the idea here is that whatever is available in this verification pipeline, it could also be used as a module. Make sense? Everybody understands this, right? So it can be reused, same feature that you are using. Okay, so what can we do? You could also try to look at the other side of the story. So what I could do is that this is one of the work that was done in 2017. And the idea here is that instead of designing all these classifier-based approaches, can we try to use something that I can see in the camera? Okay. So if I take a picture, any point, what do? I look at the scene and then I take a picture and I try to focus on certain objects. In a picture, everything will not be equally focused. So which means what is happening? The depth, depending on the depth, depending on the view, you are getting certain areas which are the focus and certain other areas which are not. And if you look very closely here, you can see the same, right? Where in the images here, you see that the nose is sharp, it's in focus. And if you look here, the entire face is completely black and it gradually changes, right? In this case, I think the eyes are very sharp and so on. So the idea here is that if you can look into a system which kind of changes the focus every single instance. So I burst 10 frames, and in each of these 10 frames in a span of milliseconds, right? Not like 10 minutes. So in the span of milliseconds, if I burst a couple of frames, then I get images which are very diverse in focus. And if the person is real, then the focus change is very different from person is. Makes sense? We discussed about this reflectance in the day three. We spoke about how the skin texture varies and so on. So the just by looking at this and just by combining the information from all of these features, and of course you can introduce any kind of feature engineering there, but the idea is that the uh, the impact of real samples is very different. It's of variable focus as compared to the face. Okay, now what other things can you do here? You do not really want to create your own system here. There is also this sensors called as light field cameras. Is there anybody that has heard of light field cameras? No? So light field cameras is a set of cameras which typically is one sensor, and then on top of one sensor instead of having one lens, have multiple lenses. Okay? So they're all organized in a cylindrical hexagonal manner. For instance, let me just, if I just try to cross here. So this is your camera lens, right? And this is your sensor. Then instead of having this one lens, what I can have is I can have this multiple lens like this, very, very small, right? So what happens is that now, instead of forming the image from this one big lens, forms the image from this part, and then the same image is formed by this part, and the same image is formed from, right? Since I have three lenses there, the size of the image reduces by one. If I have four lenses, it reduces by one. Right? So the information is duplicated, but it's also complemented. So if you manage some time, I can show you some examples of that. So the whole idea is that here, instead of capturing 10 different images, in one shot, I can capture three different images. And all these three images, they do have different complementary. Okay, so if you take it back and put it into the system itself, so how does it look like? So either you can have a system that is capturing the data in the first place, and then this can be anything, right? It could be any of those parameters. You have face, you have iris, fingerprint, voice, whatever. And then if I introduce this presentation attack detection module, what I can do is I can eliminate all this extra processing. I can already say here, look, I don't think that this image is real, so I'm rejecting this. Right? So what can I do? I can put that capture module that I showed previous slide. So you have this depth of field. In the depth of field, you're capturing 10 different samples. And then from those 10 different samples, I can stack them up. And then while I'm stacking them up, I know that the focus of the camera has changed. So with using that information, then I can align the stack. And once I have aligned the stack, I can learn any kind of class. Right? So instead of just banking on one image, now I'm banking on 10 different. Yes, let's just try to see how this actually works, right? So if you think of this is how it is working. So you have a smartphone, and then this is the field of view, right? You're getting any image has an angle. There's a particular field of view, just like humans, right? I can't really see what is happening on this side. So I have a particular field of view. And using the field of view, you're capturing multiple images. And from those images, you're trying to align them because you know the camera parameters, nothing has changed. camera remains the same. You know how exactly you have varied the along the camera. And using that information, you align the stack. And now rest of the information is not very relevant for me. Like for instance, how the focus is changing on the shirt. It's not very important, right? So I could just simply say that, okay, I only take the face, but that also gives you another opportunity. I could also use the meta information or the context information that is around the face itself. If the person is live, maybe there is no discussion. The areas in skin and the clothing, right? So that is also fun. But typically when we are doing yeah, focusing on the techniques, we are using just the face. But in the case of real world deployment, they are free to use whatever the just a side note here, why do we also talk about this context information? For instance, if I know that Manvi is supposed to be in the campus, and if I know that she's trying to do it from somewhere else, I know very likely that it's attacks, right? So I kind of use this meta information. So most of the real world system, they also use that one. Um, okay, so what can I do if I know the focus, if I have aligned all these images there? So if I take a difference between, so there is a focus that I know, and the focus change between this and this cannot be massive. It should be in certain range, right? It should be plus or minus, I don't know, let's say 5. So if I can compute all the focus from all this focus 1, focus 2, focus 3, and so on, let's assume that this is an infinity focus because I do not know when it's stopping, right? And by just looking at that, I can compute the whole total focus, the total focus difference. And then I can simply say that if the focus is not changing by, let's say, a factor of 10, then this is likely that it's not a good solution. If it is varying very intensely, it could be, right? Or vice versa, depending on how you design the system. Okay, let's see how this actually works. So if I'm looking at this one here, if I have a real image, and on the left side, what we call as bona fide. And if I try to capture the difference between the focus, and you see that there is a very sharp response, right? Now this is all very simple difference. So between all the frames and accumulate. Now, if I have an attack which is on the screen, let's say iPad or your phone or any other system, of course, there is a bit of lighting impact. The LEDs are emitting some light, which will also introduce some noise. And with that, just that noise, you can still see some amount of activation, but it's not as strong. Now, if you take it on a print, printed on a paper, that paper you see that the activations is almost zero. Make sense? So what can I do? If I know that, okay, there should be very high amount of activation, I can simply measure how many number of pixels are active, or to make it even better, I can chunk it into number of blocks, and then try to measure each activation in a particular block, and then add them all. Right? And then because I'm going to chunk this, I can chunk first into 4 parts, and second time into 8 parts, and third time into 16 parts, and each of them it can be added. Like you are then fusing the information from different blocks. Okay, so what is the other advantage of this model? So because we are able to capture this focus from different, the depth from different focus, I could also use it for constructing a 3D, right? So I can have two applications here. So one is detecting the attack, and the second one is creating a 3D model. If I'm able to create a 3D model, then it should not be having too much of holes in the face. So now here is a 3D model, right? Simply by using this. Again, this is not a deep learning based system. It's simply the structure from motion. If you're taking image processing course, if you're taking computer vision course, you know, the old school 3D and SLAM structure from motion, which typically is like camera is moved across scene, and then from each of the frames, you can correlate the information, and then you can reconstruct it. Right? It's a very simple approach, but then you can still use it here. Although I say that you can use it very simply here, you can see that there is some amount of holes there next to the ear region. So you can try to improve that part if you are interested. Okay, so now this is part one, right? Now let's say the part two of this system. So what can I do? If I'm looking at the other way, I told that every smartphone, every camera for that matter, it's a bunch of components. So between the time the person is standing out, there is external lens, and there can be multiple lenses in between, and then there is a sensor. This is typically the sensor where the image is formed. So it's you see that there is a pattern there. It's RGB. So you have this. So you have this red, green, green. So 4 pixels make 1 pixel. Okay? So this is what we see in the RGB, right? Every camera that we take that. So this is the entire process that is happening. Now, if I take the same person, picture of the same person, and then ignore all the information from other pixels and just only consider the information that is given by the red channel, only the red pixels, then this is how the image looks. Now, if I'm just taking the green pixels alone, so and this is how the image looks. And the blue alone, now if you look very closely, the image on the red channel is very bright. The blue is a bit darker. No, green is a bit darker. The blue is the one that is having the highest darkness. Right? So if I can see this information from the samples, so what can I do? Now I can use this information. I can take all the real samples, all the fake samples, and then try to see how the information changes. And then I can simply create a system. And again, here, the idea here is that I wanted to just show that you don't necessarily have to do very intensity planning, but you could also do some simple processing. For instance, simple processing here is that I have the raw sensor data, and then if I just do a filtering around the page, then I get a response. As soon as I have the response map, I can take a residue. So what is the difference between the median filtered image? Let's say in the median filtered, in this case, is a blurred version, right? So if I take a original image and the blurred version, there is a difference. By looking at the residual image, I can design any kind. For the time being, just forget about the block energy, but it's nothing but I'm getting a new image that can be used to learn against. That makes sense? Okay. So how does this actually work? So if I'm looking at this one, so if you take an image of this person and then simply blur it using a filter which is 3x3, whatever is your favorite, 3x3, 5x5, 7x7, everything. And then if I take a difference between the original image and the second image, then I can get a response. I don't know if you're able to see, maybe you see some white spots. Yeah. So these white spots, now these white spots are very sparse in nature, depending on what kind of you're. So what can I do? I can simply, again, going back to the old story, chunk the image into number of blocks. And then from each block, you're trying to measure how many pixels are. Here you can use simple sum of all the pixels, right? I can say 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. Or if you do something more so second order statistics, then I'm just taking a simple square of 2 plus pixels, averaging it out by all the blocks. So once I have this one, I know for all the real samples, it should be in some range. For all the fake samples, it should be in a different range. Maybe it's in the 0 range, right? The 0 range is nothing but the threshold. So it's a simple thing. If a person is, if the image is getting an energy of, let's say, 25, it's real. If it is getting below 25. So this is the way you can go back to the classical image processing and then try to make sure that you have very decent time. And now, as soon as I have this number of blocks, right, I can also say that I don't trust all the blocks. Maybe I trust majority. Same thing that we do in the democracy, right? We ask for people to vote, and then the one thing is vote. Such as that. Okay, again, just to give a simple idea, these are all the real images. So if I'm taking the actual image and the median filtered version, the response is very, very little as compared to the screen. because in this case, the screen will also be giving some information. And if you look even closely when I give this type, you can see some kind of circles here. See that? So that circle thing is nothing but your light that is reflected, right? So your screen is always something, and then the immediate printing is able to. So you can design such kind of simple things for like good. So now, if you actually make it a bit more advanced, you can see that face recognition system can be attacked with the prints, the masks, the 3D models, and so on. But then it's not only the physical attack, right? It's also the digital attacks that are very relevant. At least with the advent of generative AI, they become more and more critical. And one of the attacks that we have already discussed is this deepfakes, one subset. Now we have also the other attack called morphing. Third attack is called adversarial. So we'll try to focus a bit on these things. I will not be able to cover everything extensively, but I'll just give you a brief introduction to both the adversarial attacks and the morphing attack. So tomorrow, if you want to take up your own research area, so you have an idea of what is happening. Okay. So what is deepfake? This image we have already seen. And now morph is something that I'll discuss. But just to give some idea at this point of time, if I have two people, person A and person B, and then I can merge them together in different ratios. I can say, okay, give me 80% of this person, 20% of this person. Give me 70% of this person and 30% of this. Then I can also say the other way, right? Give me 50% of that person, 50% of this person, and so on. So every time I combine these images, so they form a new image, and the new image can be used for attacking this. Okay, that is point one. And then is the adversarial attack. The adversarial attack again is in a twofold scenario in the sense that um, you have it and then you put some noise onto that image. And this noise can be crafted, can be not crafted, can be random noise. And every time I put the image, it gets a new information into that, and the decision system makes a different. The recognition system makes a different, right? So the classical example I'll show in a bit, but you have that idea. And then there was also this very wonderful work which was done in 2016, if I'm not completely wrong. They were very creative in the sense all they did is just to print these funny glasses. You see these glasses? Yeah, it's basically a colorful glass that they printed on a paper, on a cardboard, and they just put it on them, and suddenly they were identified as somebody else. So this person, say researcher, was identified as a actress in the Hollywood, right? So it's a very simple and very elegant way. And also this person is a actor. So this person was an actor. So even without knowing who exists in that database, they took a random database, they just put on those glasses, and with those glasses, they were able to be identified as somebody in the database, right? Very often, maybe you want to come to the campus of ITD, and then you do not know who all exist in the campus. All you want to do is get access to this. So that is typically called as dodging attacks. So there is a number of work that is done in that aspect. I will just briefly touch upon some aspects of adversarial attack because this is becoming more and more prominent these days, given that we are using a lot of deep learning. So what is adversarial attack? So if you look at the adversarial attack, you are taking an image and then you are adding some random noise, right? This has no meaning. You see, it's a random set of pixels. And then with random set of pixels, I'm giving some weight. I'm saying, okay, add this information back into that image at a very, very, very low. So now I'm talking at the weight of 0.007. So with that 0.007, you're getting a new image, which visually is not very different. So both images look very similar, right? But internally, what happens is that the system kind of flips for that, right? That kind of. I'll tell you why it kind of flips in a short while. But then just to give you a motivation for this kind of attacks, imagine a scenario where you are trying to drive in an autonomous car, and the car is typically what it's doing is identifying these signals and symbols, right? The road signs. And what it can do is that it's written by stop, it can be completely ignored, and then it can just speed through that. If it speeds through that, what happens is that you're putting a lot of delay into it. It can lead to accidents. Uh, you can be uh, impacted, or a person standing on the road can be impacted. So the implication is a bit long, a bit larger. And then I also showed you this one, right? So it's like typically you take a face image, and then with this glasses, nothing happens, but just on the glasses, you are inserting those very weird noises. But just introducing that, it will be identified as some other person. Now I don't need to have access to that entire to find out who. Now also the interesting thing here is that I told you yesterday somewhere around 2014 or on Fridays, 2014 was the renaissance of deep learning. So the ImageNet came, AlexNet came, and as soon as AlexNet came, the number of papers on deep learning went on increasing. And it's the same trend that you see here. See, in 2014 up until 2016, 2016 was the first paper that came. So around this time, you see that people started showing that these systems are very vulnerable. Whether generative AI or non-generative AI, they're vulnerable, right? So by 2024, you can see the number of papers that are coming. Approximately 12,000 papers are coming out every single day. So you can see how active the research field is. Okay, so just to give the complementary view, so I think at least I motivated you to work on the adversarial attacks. It's a very relevant field. And if you look at the adversarial attack, you have three different knowledge levels. The knowledge level one is zero. I do not have any idea of what is happening in the system. I only know that I give my face image, it tells yes or no, and nothing. Then you have the white box knowledge, which is full knowledge, right? For instance, you trained your own ARC-based model, you trained your face recognition system, so then you have control over every single layer of that, which means I can make sure that the decision can be flipped, or the internal layers of the network can be flipped my advantage, because I have full knowledge of the system. And then comes the third one, which is intermediate between black box and white box. So in the black box scenario, I have no idea. The white box scenario, I have full idea. But in the case of gray box, it can be maybe they do not disclose the entire pipeline, but they only talk about certain pipelines, which I can. And there also I can. So what happens in the case of all this system? Now, if you look at it in a classical machine learning scenario, you have multiple classes, right? You have class F3, you have class F2, and you have class F4. So every time I'm learning a linear classifier, what am I learning? I'm learning a decision boundary between the classes, right? So I'm saying, okay, red color, it's apple. So yellow color, it's banana, right? So these are my typical decision boundaries. So what happens in this case is that in the adversarial attack, we are interested in flipping the label of that class. For instance, here, there's a panda which is with 57.7% confidence. And by putting the noise of this one, it's now telling it's a gibbon with 99%. So what is that I'm interested in? I'm interested in flipping the label of that. So flipping the label of the class is this one, right? So the sample that belongs here is in this class, it's one, X. If I continuously add some noise, the noise is the epsilon. I keep on adding, I keep on adding. At one point of time, it exceeds this decision boundary and suddenly it's recognized as a different class. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. So since we will not be able to focus on a lot of all these aspects, we will only focus on some black box models here, and then you can generalize it. So black box attacks are typically hard to conduct because you don't have any knowledge. But white box attacks are relatively easier to. Yes. It's a very interesting question. If I know the system, I can create my own noise, right? I can create a universal noise which is can attack all the images. Luckily for us, the researchers from Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, they wrote a very wonderful paper in 2018, I think. They wrote a paper which shows that you can craft that. So you can create image poisoning. Now, if I can poison this image, right? So if I'm simply poisoning this image can be put in the database. So then you start failing the entire system, start attacking. Yes. So the question was very good. So you can craft attacks for your own application. For instance, if you know that it's a face recognition system, how it works, which scenario it works, you can create your own. Okay. Also, for those of you who are still wondering about what to work on in your master thesis, bachelor thesis, or your PhD thesis, there's a wide taxonomy of attacks. Like each of these attack has its own string. So if you look at the taxonomy of attacks, you can start looking at it from the threat modeling perspective. You can say that, okay, adversarial attacks can be either to make false positives, so to identify somebody as somebody else, or false negatives to reject me as the person. And then on the other side, you can think of it as white box, gray box, or black box attack. And then I told you about this targeted and untargeted attacks. So what is targeted? I know that, let's say, Suhas uses SBI system, and then I can just go and say that, okay, I am Suhas, and I'm trying to target him. In the other case, I do not know who's in the campus. So I'm just trying to randomly get access to this, right? This is untargeted. And then you can also have this one-time attacks and the iterative attack. The one-time attack is the sense that I do not have any idea. I simply give an image, and then it should go. But then sometimes if you're interacting with the system, they might also tell you that, okay, I got a comparison score which was 0.3. Can you try giving your image? Then I know that the system is not accepting me because score is 0.3. I need to improve the score. So to improve the score, I can again come back to the new one, right? Maybe I put on some classes, maybe I put on some makeup until the score becomes better. So I'm iteratively attacking the system by looking at the score or by looking. Okay. And then if you look at the other side of the story, then you have the perturbations. The perturbation which we spoke about now, it could be individual perturbation. It means I understand the characteristics of the other person. So if I know that, let's say my sister uses a certain kind of eyelashes or glasses, then I always try to buy that kind of glasses so that the system identifies. So that is individual. And then it could be also universal. So universal in the sense that we could now say that, okay, all the people in light EDM, they are all this white shirt with this particular kind of cap. Then I try to mimic that. Okay. So this is the one. But purely from the machine learning side, look at that, you can look at it as an optimized problem or the constraint. So what is the optimized problem? So the whole goal is to minimize the loss, which is what we are doing, right? For learning and deep learning, we are optimizing the loss. In the same case here, I can optimize the image to get higher precision. And then you have a constraint base, and then I say in the constraint base, you do not have resources, let's assume resources, or you do not have multiple attempts. And then with the limited number of attempts or with the limited amount of computation, how well can it be done? And then also there is this other idea, right? If you look at the adversarial attacks here, 10 cents sparse. What do I mean by 10 cents sparse? Let's just take a simple example here. So what am I trying to do? I'm to insert the whole image here and some pixels are active, right? So not all the pixels are active. So this is typically the sparse. But what I also do, I could also make it very dense and then put it back. Now, as interesting as it sounds, one of the important aspects here is to make sure the visual fidelity of the image is not destroyed. So if I get image here and this image looks extremely different, then it's not an effective. Okay? It's an effective attack if it is completely automated. But if there is a human sitting there, he will spot it very, right? He will look at the image and he says, okay, this image is not relevant. Okay, and then you also have this the other one, right? In terms of perturbation measurements, what kind of distance you are using? Is it L norm distance? Is it a different distance? So on. Okay, okay, so this I already showed you before. So if you now take a very closer look, you'd see that these are not even classes, right? These are simply printed on a paper, cardboard, and stuck on a glass, and then that's in. So there in the paper, if you look at it, they talk about two different modes. One is called as uh, impersonation attacks, and the other one is called as the dodging attacks. So in the dodging attacks, you are just dodging some random person, right? And in the impersonation, you are trying to impersonate one person, very specific. Okay, so should we have to do all such interesting things to get through the system? Really not so much of advanced engineering is required. There is another set of researchers from like now in IIT Jabalpur, IIT Jaipur, so Jodhpur, sorry, Jodhpur. So they also showed this very simple attacks. In this case, they took the random images. They showed, okay, these are the two pair of images, and the score is around 0.23, which is accepted. So what can I do? I simply put some random lines. It's not even a, it's not even a parameter attack. It's be the presence of these lines. You see that? Yeah. And these lines resulted in a score which was of 0.7. Right? In this case, it was dissimilarity. So higher dissimilarity, and then it was rejected. So, and then they also showed in the paper, they showed a number of other attacks, such as by blocking the image. Certain part of the image is blocked, then the eyes are blocked, and then they some funny artifacts on the image. All of these images get passed through the system. So adversarial attack, very simple. And also in the other one, you can see some noise, right? This is typically the noise that you would find if you're capturing the image in a night light setting. You see some dots on the image. And this image can also be very useful in practice. Okay, and then you can also do some kind of very practical view of that. So what do you want? When you're creating your face recognition system, you want to create a system which has such kind of distributed score, right? So you want the score that's completely well separated. Of course, you might have some overlap, but this is the ideal scenario. In this, what you can do is, as soon as you are attacking the system, what happens is that I'm trying to take an image and then trying to put some noise onto that. So what happens is this in terms of the implementation level. So the scores are getting quickly. So all the scores that were on this side now are moved, which means now either this person is accepted or this person is rejected. Right? And there, if you look on the top, that image is of very low quality, right? You see that, and manually you can eliminate this. But what happens in the case of the face system is that they're automated. There's no human sitting there and then verifying. For instance, in your mobile bank scenario, what are you doing? You're just taking up your phone and then you're taking a picture and then sending. And there is no human that is controlling. So in this case, this can easily go that. But hyperturbation is not really recommended. So what we can do is we can control that even very low, sorry, very low perturbation levels. Okay, for those of you who are interested in the machine learning side of the attacks, you can see that it's nothing but a sign gradient sign method. Gradients everybody knows from the deep learning, right? So we did that exercise on the day one where we said, okay, we a 3x3 matrix and y matrix. And then as soon as I have that, so this is nothing but the same theta that we spoke about, the parameters. And this is nothing but x and y are a particular input and the output, the pair of input output. So if I know that, I can keep on adding the delta to this until the sign gets changed. Right? So this is as simple as modeling the FGS attacks. Then you can also do the gradient descent attacks because in the learning process, you're also descending the gradient. Right? So you're going down from one level to another. Now again comes the same idea. You have the input examples X and the labels Y, and then D is typically your data distribution. And then within that data distribution, within the set of parameters here, you can try to optimize that. So again, now if you look at that, you already identified it's a loss function, the loss function that we use in the algorithm, right? Okay, so how does this look like in sense? So here, if I did not actually give you the labels on the bottom part, this image is almost okay. Right? This image looks okay. Maybe there is a bit of noise, but it's okay. But in fact, it's attacking, right? With the epsilon of 0.1. And if you increase the strength of that, right, the noise levels, then the image becomes extremely corrupt like this. Then this is impractical to be used. Impractical to be used in the automated system, but with the manual systems, it's difficult. Now, all I want you to also imagine is that between 0 and 0.1, there are also 10 different scales. It can be 0.01, 0.02, 0.03. So with all those systems, you are still able to get through the bypass. Okay, so now what can you do? You can take a and here is the evaluation of the system. You can see that any of these commercial systems, including the deep learning based systems, you are giving such samples, it gives you an equal error rate of 0.00, right? So which means that these attacks are very effective in even if you the basic systems which are deployed. Okay. Now there might be some recent advances which are trying to address this, but this was the work that was done 2 or 3 years ago, and there you could see. So what can I do now to bring back the system without having any other additional measures? I could simply create n number of samples and then retrain the whole system. That means I take the FRS that we trained on Monday, no, sorry, on Thursday, and then I put in the adversarial samples and then train it again. At this time, I'm making sure that the attack samples are not taken in the training part, that considered as not as training. Okay? But this is an expensive process, right? Because you don't want to retrain the systems over and over again. So if you just retrain it, of course, you will get the system back to the original one. I'll share the slides so you can take a look at them later on. But remember, one of the things that should be also taken into account for your own books is that the quality of images is very important. You have to optimize the attacks both for automated systems and also for the systems where humans are involved. And then there is a bigger problem, which might be interesting for many of you who are going to take your thesis. There is a generalizability problem. For instance, if I know the attacks that are crafted today, ABC, and then if I'm trying to test it on new attacks, which are XYZ later on, they're not very well scalable. And then there is also this other factor, right, which we'll discuss tomorrow morning a bit more, bias factors. For instance, maybe for all the people that are from India, works perfectly well. But if I'm taking it to a system for the system for people in China, it might not work. So then we are treating two different populations very different. And then there is also this interesting problem that is kind of still very open for those of you who are looking for a more challenging problem. How does this shifting of the boundary really impact? The popular theory is that the decision boundaries are very sharp, and then when you retrain the system, the decision boundaries become smoother, and making it more smoother is also impact, right? Can start giving you the wrong position. So that aspect is still not very well studied. Okay, I don't know when we should break, and then we can continue again. It's the time for break. Time for break, or should we just continue? Take a break now? Okay. So then we can take a break, and I introduce you this one, and then I'll touch upon deep fakes, and then we do a practical of deep fake. While you go for your break, what you can do is if you have your laptop with you, just download the data and the code for today's assignment. It's already uploaded on the Google Drive.